Okay, tests and evaluations with the right instruments, and then summarizing the data. It's a very broad thing, but very simple answer, guys. A lot of people within the IDEA, looking at the IDEA, looking at the law, and regardless of the state that you live in, every state has to replicate what the federal IDEA says. Okay, so this is applicable across all the states. Now, what you need to understand is that you have two sections to the IDEA pertaining to evaluations. You have the initial eligibility part discussing initial eligibility and evaluations, and then you have the second part about reevaluation. These are interchangeable, guys, because there's aspects embedded within the initial eligibility process that refers to reevaluation. So it's not like, once your child's eligible, then you sit there and discount that section. Speaking about evaluations and appropriate evaluations and how to conduct those, you need to sit there and make sure that you're focusing on both and what the law requires. Okay, and puts on the institutions that receive the funding, and that would be the local education agencies, the LEAs, or your local school. Said in a different way, okay? Your local school is the LEA. They are the ones that receive the funds from the state and from the federal government to where they have to comply with this law. And so when it comes to evaluations and assessments, it is very specific that they need to be thorough. They also need to test for known and unknown disabilities and issues for your child, okay? Now, that's sometimes an impossible task, but it's still a requirement in there, meaning that we're not supposed to just sort of half-ass it. We need to sit there and do a little bit more exploration to make sure that we are truly understanding of the child and their deficits across their educational performance areas. And that's the two words that schools often do not know, do not understand, have not retooled to the NJRF standard, and that is educational performance. Educational performance is where we develop goals and services for the child. It's not academics only, guys. Their educational performance areas are connected to their unique needs, their individual circumstances. Those things are connected to your child's diagnostics. What is their diagnostic profile? How does their disability manifest? That is what produces their unique needs and their individual circumstances. It is that, not necessarily their eligibility category under the IDEA. That's sort of inconsequential. They needed an avenue in order to qualify, but that doesn't denote and explain thoroughly their unique needs and their individual circumstances. So it takes us back to where those things in your child's diagnostic manifestations and how it impacts the child across their educational performance areas: academics, communication, social emotional development, functional independent living skills. These are the four areas where we develop goals, we develop services, we put into place accommodations, we have supplemental aids and services that are pushed in. How do we find this stuff? How do we determine? Well, we determine it through evaluations. We determine it through assessments. And so it takes us back to that whole section within the IDEA, either the initial eligibility or the reevaluation section, and we read it, and we understand it, and we understand that it needs to be thorough. We understand that it needs to be done so that we even identify unknown, not that apparent areas, okay, of need. And there's two reasons we evaluate, guys. We evaluate to every 3 years, a minimum, in order to make sure that the child still requires specialized instruction or special education. All right? Does a child continue to be eligible? Now, many schools just go, that's it. That's all I have to do. Well, that's not true. That's just one component of why we evaluate. The second is the most important. This, we only probe every 3 years, guys. So it's not that important. If we only do it every 3 years, it's not that important. What's important is the other one. The other reason we evaluate, and that is to get good baselines or present levels of performance. So we understand the child's needs. We understand their deficits across all educational performance areas. And at that point, we can sit there and really pinpoint and put together an IEP and services and supports that will provide the child a free, appropriate public education. But to answer that question, it is thorough evaluations. It is exploratory to the point where we're even trying to identify even unknown things that may not be that apparent. But the most important aspect is, in the law, it says that we need to use a variety of testing instruments and evaluations in the child's preferred mode of communication that would be expected to produce reliable results. So we got thorough, we have a variety of assessments, we have in the child's preferred mode of communication that can produce the most reliable results. So most schools will sit there and say, well, what's on the shelf? And what's on the shelf are going to be your same run-of-the-mill traditional testing instruments: cognitive IQ test, achievement test, like a Woodcock-Johnson or a Kaufman, a Weschler for an intelligence. You have a Stafford-Binet. You have all of those. That's not necessarily good for your child, especially if your child has limited communicative skills. I just started a case on a child that they actually put in there in the last evaluation. It was a nonverbal assessment nonverbal IQ assessment, and they actually put in there couldn't condition the student to participate, and therefore couldn't get any results. And then they just checked the box like it was fine. And this was 2 years ago. And my thing is, we're not fine. We're not fine, Spider. Okay, we're not good. And so at that point, we need to sit there and go back to the table and find a different grouping of assessments that could produce reliable results, that is in the child's preferred mode of communication. We don't just stop there and go, well, we tried. That doesn't fulfill your duty under the law. So you see where all of these things, they all mesh together. But to answer that question, thorough, a variety of assessments in the child's preferred mode of communication that will produce reliable results. That's it. That's the standard. And once again, it isn't to just determine whether your child continues to be eligible. We need to do these things with a frequency to where we're getting good present levels of performance. We are getting accurate indicators of where the child is currently functioning, and the schools are failing measurable in this regard. And you as a parent can ask for evaluations yearly, just not more than that. Okay, the school can ask for them yearly as well, but just understand the benefit of when to use them and when not to use them. Okay, if there's absolutely no question that your child will continue to be eligible, then yeah, I mean, what the heck. But if your child is one of those that's sort of floating on the gray line and they're sort of skimming the water of eligibility and continued eligibility, especially if they're on meds, then if you trigger evaluations every year, the school can sit there and go, well, we'll just consider eligibility as well since we're at it. And I've had that occur where parents go, oh, my kid's now disqualified. And so just understand when to use them and when it would be valuable. And sometimes you're not looking for a full reeval anyway. You're looking for targeted assessments in very specific areas. And that wouldn't be a full reeval. You just need to sit there and clarify and explain to the team what you're looking for. You're looking for a variety of assessments in order to target and assist the IEP team in developing goals in social emotional areas, or which includes behavior or communication or in academics. And therefore, what exists out there other than these traditional assessments? Because there's assessments specific for written language. There's tests that are specific for oral reading. Just using a sort of a broad brush assessment, a traditional assessment, doesn't necessarily get us to where we need to be, and it's targeting specific areas of deficit. So great question, but that's the answer.